DNA test revealed a family secret spanning 45 years. My name is Sarah. I'm 62 years old, and my entire life I believed I was an orphan. My father, James Collins, died in Vietnam in 1968, a month before I was born. Mom never talked much about him, only that he was a brave soldier and would have loved me very much if he had lived to see my birth. She passed away 15 years ago, taking all memories of my father with her. Last year, my daughter Emily gave me a DNA test kit for my birthday. "Mom, let's learn more about our roots," she said. I wasn't particularly interested, but to avoid disappointing my daughter, I sent the sample to the lab. 8 weeks later, the results came back. I expected to see standard ancestry information, some Irish genes, maybe English, but what I saw made my blood run cold. In the close relatives section, a result glowed. Possible nephew, 25% DNA match. Name, Michael Stevens, 38 years old, lives in Portland, Oregon. I stared at the screen, not understanding. My father had no brothers. Mom always said he was an only child who died in the war. How could I have a nephew? For several days, I couldn't bring myself to write to Michael. What if this was a mistake? What if the lab mixed up samples? But curiosity won over fear. I wrote to him. "Hi, Michael. I'm Sarah Collins from Denver. According to the DNA test, we might be related. Could we talk? I'm shocked. Can we talk on the phone tonight? I need to tell you about my father." That phone call changed my entire life. Michael told me his father's name is David Stevens, 89 years old, living in a nursing home in Portland. And the most incredible part, David had spent his whole life believing his daughter, from his first love, died at birth in 1968. Michael explained that his father had told them about a girl who was supposed to become his first daughter. A mother refused to communicate with him after the war and said the baby was born dead. For David, this was a closed, painful chapter from his past. I felt the ground disappearing beneath my feet. "Michael, when did your father serve in Vietnam?" I asked. "He was drafted in 1968, captured within a month of arrival. Spent 3 years in a prisoner of war camp. Only returned in 1971, Michael answered. My hands began to shake. "Michael, my mother was pregnant with me when my father left for Vietnam in 1968, but he died before my birth. At least, that's what my mom told me." A long pause followed. Then Michael quietly said, "Sarah, what was your mother's maiden name?" "Mary Harris," I replied. I heard him gasp sharply. "Oh my God, that's the same name my dad has mentioned his whole life. Mary Harris from Denver. Sarah, I think you're his daughter, the daughter he thought was dead for 45 years. The next day, I boarded a plane to Portland. My hands shook the entire flight. If this was true, then my life was one big lie. My father didn't die in the war. He's alive, and he thinks I died at birth. Michael met me at the airport, tall, with dark hair and familiar eyes. "Sarah," he said, hugging me. "I didn't sleep all night. Dad didn't either. He's in complete shock." Sunny Gardens Nursing Home was a beautiful, well-maintained place. Michael warned me that David was very nervous. "He can't believe this is real," Michael told me. "For 45 years, he thought you were dead. This has always been a painful topic for him." We entered room 237. An elderly man sat in a chair by the window, turning sharply at our entrance. When he looked at me, I saw my own eyes in a masculine, aged face. David, Michael said gently. This is Sarah. Sarah Harris. The old man stared at me like I was a ghost. His lips trembled. Mary was pregnant with you when I left, he whispered. You have her lips, but my nose, my eyes. He tried to stand, and I rushed to him. Dad, I whispered, speaking this word to my real father for the first time in my life. He embraced me with trembling arms and cried, I thought you were dead. For 45 years, I thought my little girl died before ever coming into this world. The next hours became the most emotional of my life. David told me the story that explained my entire existence. In early 1968, he was dating my mother, then Mary Harris. They were engaged and planning a wedding after his return from the war. But when the draft notice came, Mom was already 2 months pregnant. I promised Mary I'd return for the birth, my father told me. We were choosing names for the baby. If a girl, Sarah. If a boy, James. In Vietnam, his unit was ambushed a month after arrival. Most soldiers died. David was severely wounded and captured by the North Vietnamese. 3 years and 4 months, he recalled. Life in the camp was hell. Bad food, no medical care, constant interrogations. But I held on, thinking about Mary and our child. I didn't know if you were born, whether you were a boy or girl, but I dreamed of returning home to my family. In 1971, he was finally freed. He was broken physically and mentally, weighed 35 pounds less, could barely walk due to a damaged leg. First thing I did was go to Mary, my father continued. But neighbors said she had moved 2 years earlier. It took me months to find her new address in another state. When he finally found Mom, she was living in Colorado Springs with a new husband named Collins. I called her. My father's voice trembled with the memory. She didn't want to talk to me, said she had a new life, a new husband. And when I asked about the baby, he fell silent, wiping away tears. She said you were born dead, that the labor was difficult and you didn't survive, that she had grieved for 2 years and now was trying to move on and didn't want to dredge up the past. My own tears flowed like a river. But Dad, I was alive. I was healthy, I told him. I believed her, my father explained to me. Why wouldn't I believe her? She was the mother of my child. Why would she lie about such a terrible thing? Besides, I had barely survived the war myself. Death surrounded me every day. A baby dying at birth seemed like just another tragedy of war. David told me he accepted this news as another blow from fate. War had taken his health, and now he learned he had lost the child he never saw. For several months, I was depressed. He admitted to me. I went to Army psychologists. They helped me accept the loss and move forward. They said I wasn't to blame for the baby's death, that these things happen. The Army offered him a rehabilitation program and a new identity through the Witness Protection Program. He had seen too much during captivity. James Collins really did die in that Vietnamese camp, my father explained to me. The man who returned became David Stevens. The new name helped start life with a clean slate. In 1975, he met Barbara, a nurse from the Veterans Hospital. She helped him finally cope with the war trauma and agreed to marry him. I told her about the lost daughter, David recalled. Barbara was an understanding woman. She knew I had a tragedy in my past, but it didn't interfere with our relationship. Barbara and David raised 3 children, Michael and 2 daughters. The children knew that Dad once had a daughter who died before their birth. But it wasn't a painful topic in the family. Michael told me later, Dad sometimes mentioned Sarah, especially on her birthday, but it was like mentioning any close person who had died. Sad, but not destructive to the family. I met my half-sisters, Lisa, 55, and Jennifer, 52. They were shocked by the news, but warmly accepted me. "We knew about you as our older sister who died," Lisa told me, hugging me. "Dad said that if you had survived, you would have been much older than us. We never imagined we'd meet you alive." Jennifer added, "For Dad, you are a closed chapter." He rarely talked about those times. The war was a difficult topic for him. But the most shocking thing was learning how the news of my death had affected David. Michael explained to me, "After that conversation with your mom, Dad finally closed that chapter of his life. He went through therapy, married Mom Barbara, created a new family. Of course, the memory of the lost daughter was always with him, but he learned to live with that pain." Lisa added, "He was a normal father to us, not overprotective, not paranoid, just a loving dad who wanted his children to be happy." Jennifer remembered, "Once a year, on your birthday, he would become a little sadder. But that was natural. Anyone grieves for lost loved ones on special days." We went to their old family home, where David lived before moving to the nursing home. It was an ordinary house of an ordinary American family. No memorial altars or special places for remembering a dead daughter. The family photos showed nothing strange either. Just a happy family of 5 people living their lives. Lisa showed me photos and explained, "Mom Barbara knew about your story, but it didn't affect our family. For her, you were part of Dad's past, like his war trauma or old friends. She accepted Dad as he was, with all his history. On the last day of my first visit, David was especially emotional. 'Sarah, I still can't believe you're alive,' he told me. 'For 45 years, I considered you dead. To me, you were a beautiful but painful memory. And now it turns out that all these years, you were living your life, raising children, being happy. Dad, you're not to blame for not knowing,' I told him. 'Mom made the decision to separate us. You believed what she told you. But now I understand I missed your entire life,' he continued. 'Your first steps, school, graduation, wedding, your children being born. I could have been a grandfather from the beginning. We have now,' I told him, 'and we have the future.' When I returned to Denver, the first thing I did was visit Mom's grave. I stood before the headstone feeling a complex mix of emotions. 'Mom, why did you lie?' I whispered. 'Why did you deprive us of each other?' But gradually, I began to understand her motives. In 1971, Mom was a 25-year-old woman with a 3-year-old child. For 3 years, she thought the father of my child was dead. She had built a new life with Robert Collins, who gave us stability and security. When David unexpectedly returned from the dead, he was a broken veteran with physical and mental trauma. In those days, little was known about post-traumatic stress disorders, and there was insufficient help for veterans. Maybe Mom was scared for our stability. Maybe she thought it was better to preserve a strong family with Robert than risk uncertainty with a traumatized soldier. By saying I had died, she protected her new life and freed David from responsibility for a child he had never seen. It was a selfish but understandable choice for a young mother trying to survive in difficult circumstances. The next weekend, our whole family went to Portland. Emily was stunned by the news about her living grandfather. "Mom, so I always had a grandfather, but we didn't know?" she asked me. This is so strange and so wonderful at the same time. When David saw his great-grandchildren, 10-year-old Jake and 8-year-old Sophia, He couldn't contain his emotions. "I have great grandchildren," he kept repeating. "My God, I have a family I never knew about. Jake looked like David in his youth, and Sophia had his eyes and my smile." "Grandpa David," Sophia said, climbing onto his lap. "Mom says you thought she died when she was little." "Yes, sunshine," he replied to her. "But now I know she was alive and grew up to be a wonderful mom." The children quickly became attached to their new grandfather. He told them stories about his life, showed old photographs, taught Jake to play chess. "Grandpa," Jake asked, "were you sad when you thought Grandma died?" "Of course I was sad," David answered him. "But then I had other children, and life went on. And now, I'm the happiest grandfather in the world because I learned that my first daughter was alive all this time." We organized a family reunion where I met the entire Stevens family. For the first time in my life, I had a real big family. Father, brothers, sisters, nephews, nieces. "Welcome to the Stevens family," Michael told me, raising a toast. "You were always part of our story. We just thought that part ended before our birth." Now David and I talk every day. He moved to a nursing home in Denver to be closer to us. We spend every weekend together, making up for lost time. The most amazing thing is that now I have answers to all the questions that tormented me my whole life. Why we had no photos of my father at home. Why Mom never told details about him. Why I always felt something wasn't right in our family story. "I always suspected Mom was hiding something," I told David. "Her stories about my father were too general, without personal details. Now I understand why. She just didn't want to dive into painful memories. And I carried sadness about my lost daughter my whole life," my father replied to me. "Not destructive pain, but quiet grief that sometimes surfaced on special days. I never could have imagined you were alive and happy somewhere nearby." People ask me if I'm angry at Mom for lying. At first, I was furious, but understanding came with time. Mom was young and scared. She made a choice that seemed best for everyone in that situation. David forgave her too. Mary was in a difficult situation, he tells me. War destroyed many families. Maybe she really thought she was doing the right thing, protecting the stability of her new family. Through the DNA test, I found not only my father, I found an entire family that warmly welcomed me into their ranks. I found answers to questions that had tormented me for decades. But most importantly, I discovered that love doesn't disappear, even when it seems its object is dead. David carried my memory for 45 years, and I felt emptiness my whole life, where the connection to my father should have been. David tells me the DNA test was a miracle. For 45 years, I considered you dead, he says, and you were alive, raising children in a neighboring state. If that's not divine intervention, what is? Next week, we're planning a big family trip. David wants to show me his childhood places in Kansas, introduce me to the graves of my grandparents, whom I never knew. Let them know their granddaughter was found, he tells me. Let them know the family line continues through you and your children. I'm 62, he's 89, but we're just beginning to know each other as father and daughter. Every conversation reveals new details of our shared history. Every meeting creates memories we were deprived of for 45 years. Sometimes I think about how differently my life would have turned out if Mom had told the truth. But then I realize life unfolded exactly as it should have. I had a good life with Mom and my stepfather, got an education, created a family, raised a daughter. And now, when my father and I are wise enough to treasure every moment, we have a chance to know each other and create new memories. And it all started with a simple DNA test that my daughter gave me. Science gave us the opportunity to find family lost almost half a century ago. Love survives time, distance, and even death. Even when it seems someone has left your life forever, the connection remains, waiting for its moment to manifest again.